I'm Don Worsham, Annabelle and Tristan's dad. As you guys probably know, on the 25th of April, just a week or so ago, on a Saturday, just about noon actually, there was a massive earthquake in Nepal. It destroyed centuries worth of architecture, artifacts, but it also killed over 6,000 people. At least that's the total as of today, and it'll certainly climb a lot higher. I started studying Nepal about a decade ago. I first went there in 1999, and I just went to climb a mountain. I really didn't know much about Nepal. I went to climb this peak called Pamori that sits right across the Khumbu Icefall from Mount Everest. Now Pamori is not as big as Everest, it's about 7,000 meters, but it's right in the same chain with China to the north and Nepal going down to the south. In fact, if you've seen any of the video of the avalanche that wiped out base camp right after this earthquake, it's the ice bridge that connects Pamori to Lingtran to Everest that collapsed. And I walked across that exact ice fall, twice actually, once going up and once coming down, as we summited Pamori in 1999. And I remember standing up there and looking down at the vastness of Nepal and all the people at base camp, hundreds and hundreds of people at base camp. And I was struck by just how magnificent this place is. So struck that when I came home back to the United States, I quit my job as an aircraft engineer and went back to school, working on a PhD in religion. And I was lucky enough while I was getting my PhD to get a pretty good sized grant that let me go live in Nepal. And so I packed up Annabelle and Tristan and their mom, and we moved from California to Nepal, where we stayed for several years. Indeed, that's where I do most of my work today. I'll tell you some things about Nepal. Nepal's a very unique place, and I know you hear that about every place. I mean, where we live here in Los Angeles is very unique. But Nepal has some very special things that you don't see any place else in the world. Number one, it's a tiny place. It's a rectangle, sort of like California is a rectangle, but California is 3 times bigger than Nepal. It's only 500 miles in length and only 150 miles across. You can walk across it in a couple of days. Number two, in that small space, in that small geography, there is such an extreme difference in altitude that down in the south, near India, you're almost at sea level, just a couple hundred feet above sea level. And in the north, on the border with China, is the highest point on the planet, top of Mount Everest, 29,000 feet. And all that in 150 miles. Plus, Nepal is a confluence of many different religions. We normally think about Buddhists being in Nepal because the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was born in Nepal, but actually most of Nepal is Hindu. There's a real alliance with India, Nepal's big brother to the south, and also one with China, Nepal's big brother to the north. And because there's so many people from so many different cultures shoved into this one little tiny country, 500 miles by 150 miles, there's a real melting pot of religions. There are Hindus, there are Buddhists, there's a growing Islamic population, there are Catholics, there are Christians, there's Jews. There's a Bon religion where they worship rocks and trees, and all these people shoved in one spot. Now you would think that because of that, Nepal would be a very violent place, because if you look at any other place in our planet where so many religions are shoved into a tiny area, it usually ends up in violence. Look at the Middle East, for example. But in Nepal, there's no religious tension. In fact, and this is what draws religious scholars like myself to study in Nepal, all these religions openly worship at each other's shrine. So there'll be a Hindu shrine or a Buddhist shrine. And everybody from every religion will go there and celebrate and share the festivals. This makes Nepal unique on the planet. And it's a real draw for people. And it's a real tragedy that it's been destroyed. Now, as I said, normally we associate Buddhism with Nepal, probably because that's the birthplace of Siddhartha. And Siddhartha was born, there's a lot of argument about the exact date, but he was born somewhere around 500 BCE, before the time of Christ, before year zero, before the Common Era. And it took years, centuries, for Buddhism to spread. I know you guys have studied this in social studies classes, but it took several centuries till actually the 7th century CE for Buddhism to go south through India and weave its way across and up into China. That's not a very sophisticated reason why it took so long. The tallest mountain range in the world stood between the two areas, and it's almost impossible to cross, so Buddhism had to move around. One of the interesting things that happened when Buddhism hit China was it assimilated part of the warrior class rituals that were predominantly used in China at that time. Specifically, the making of brightly colored flags. Now, I know you guys are going to be creating what's called wish flags here at Wright, and that is tremendous. But let me tell you a little bit about how wish flags came into being. Two of the basic tenets of Buddhism are compassion and peace. And when Buddhists arrived on the Tibetan plateau in what is now China, just to the north of Nepal, and they came in contact with the warrior class that were flying banners as they went into battle, these brightly colored banners with scary symbols on them, like dragons and three-headed lizards and swordsmen to intimidate the enemy. Well, the Buddhists saw that and they said, hey, that's really interesting. And so they began the practice of making their own flags, their own banners. But instead of putting scary symbols on them, they printed peaceful wishes, sometimes prayers, sometimes offerings, sometimes simple intentions like peace. Every single wish flag with a wish put on it that's strung out into the breeze, the Buddhists believe will have that wish carried across the universe by the wind that blows through it. And so as you make these wish flags, think about the centuries of history that has gone into such a simple thing, because that's all a wish flag is. It's a way of sharing a wish, an intention, a desire to the entire world. And Nepal really needs that right now. Not only were they just hit by this earthquake, not only were 6,000 plus people killed, not only were centuries worth of antiquities destroyed, they're about to go into what's called monsoon season. And I'm sure a lot of you know what monsoon season is. If you don't, look it up. Basically, in a few weeks, in their summer, which is our summer too, because Nepal's in the northern hemisphere, it's going to start raining. And while that sounds great for us here in drought-struck in California, in Nepal it's going to be devastating, because when monsoon season hits, it starts raining and it rains for about 3 months. There will be landslides, mudslides, more avalanches. I've lived through monsoon season there. Annabelle has too. The water in the streets is up over your knees. It's horrible. So you add that to the death toll, you add that to the destruction of property, you add that to really what is the most devastating effect of this earthquake, in my opinion. Just the way that the Nepali people, these peaceful people, are beat down and psychologically destroyed. And I can tell you that every single penny that you guys donate, every single wish flag that you fly in the breeze, will end up helping Nepal tremendously. Your donations are going to go to a place called Karuna Session. This is a organization that's only about 200 meters from our house in Nepal. We still keep an apartment in Nepal in the area called Bodhana. Annabelle knows it very, very well. It was started by a French scientist, a biochemist named Matthew Ricard. He became a Buddhist monk. And every single penny that is donated to him now is going to go to feed, clothe, and provide shelter to people that are in need. Every penny helps. Every penny brings new hope to Nepal.